OMG, as the kids say. Here to do another tour, guys. Today I'm at Roosevelt Island. Yeah, I'm gonna take down my mask because, believe me, there's no one on this entire island, and we're gonna be far away from people anyway, so take it easy. There we go, can do that, there we go. I'm actually at the south end of the island. It's a small 147-acre island in the East River. I'm doing this one because the Patreon people chose it. Yeah, if you're not on Patreon, you should do that. I'll put a little link in there, you know, no big deal. If you could sign up, that'd be great. Also, too, just go ahead and like this video now. It can save you the trouble later. And subscribe, please subscribe. It's freezing out here. That's the least you can do. But anyways, guys, I'm on Roosevelt Island, in front of the UN. Look at that, the United Nations building. Oh, how cool. It's been here since the 1950s. I can get into that. That's a whole other thing. Speaking of which, there's Utah Island, the smallest island in New York City. It's like, you know, like 100 feet wide. It's pretty small. They made it with landfill from the actual Steinway Tunnel, which takes the 7 train into Queens. All right, look, I'm not gonna go too far and all that stuff. We're on Roosevelt Island. I gotta cover Roosevelt Island. This place is super sick. We're in Four Freedoms Park. Hopefully we don't get kicked out for filming. It's always a risk, but I'm taking it for you. If we're ready to start, I don't know. What do you think, Phil? Should we start this thing?
Hell yeah.
All right, let's go. So we're walking now through Four Freedoms Park, named for Franklin Delano Roosevelt, sorry. He was actually President of the United States. If you guys don't know that, FDR, President during the Second World War. It's called Four Freedoms Park because four freedoms, you know. That's him right there, check it out. See his face? Huge face. Oh, you can see it, cool. But this is Four Freedoms Park, named after the State of the Union address that Franklin Delano Roosevelt gave in 1941, right as the United States was deciding to enter World War II. And he named 4 freedoms that he thought were things that should be protected at all costs. They were freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom from want, and freedom from fear. Pretty cool. In fact, they inspired some Norman Rockwell paintings that became pretty famous. And here you go, to the left, you have all of Manhattan. We're in the East River. Like I said before, it's 147 acres, pretty small. It's gone through so many different existences, though. We're going to talk about all that as we go. By the way, too, FDR, their family has long roots in New York. Knickerbocker family. Knickerbocker, a term coined by Washington Irving to describe people whose families can trace their lineage back to the Dutch settlement of New Amsterdam. Roosevelt family is one of those families. In fact, Teddy Roosevelt was the first president ever born and raised in New York City. Before Trump, obviously. Trump is the other one. And Roosevelt, New Yorker. That's kind of cool. He wasn't from New York City, but he's from New York State. All right, that's enough of that. Cool view here. You can see the Queensboro Bridge off in the distance. Pretty awesome view of the Queensboro Bridge. Now, one of the cool things about Roosevelt Islands is that we are super isolated, which you will find out as we walk around because we're not going to see a whole lot of people. The Queensboro Bridge was one of the first, I guess, connections to this island. It was built in 1909. In fact, Henry Hornbostel was one of the architects who designed it. And he actually helped design the Williamsburg Bridge as well. You may see some of the similarities. Also had a huge hand in developing and designing Emory University, which is where I went to law school. No big deal. But yeah, he designed the Queensboro Bridge, which was finished in 1909, the same year as the Manhattan Bridge. Remember this, and also too, keep in mind, this bridge is the only bridge into Queens from Manhattan. So it's pretty important, helped Queens kind of blow up and explode in population, become less of a backwater. Brooklyn had bridges before Queens did, so it kind of blew up a little bit quicker and more quickly. Now here to the right, this is the Smallpox Hospital. This is super cool. This was actually built in 1856 as a smallpox hospital, a hospital for smallpox. That's nuts. 1856, it was actually designed by James Renwick Jr., who also designed the St. Patrick's Cathedral. He designed Grace Church, very important architect. But he designed this thing, and it was a smallpox hospital until the 1870s when it became a nurses training school, which it was until the 1950s, and then it was actually just a ruin. It was unused. And then in the 1970s, New York City decided to basically save it. It's a landmark to ruin, believe it or not, which is pretty sick. Like, they actually like reinforced and everything just so it'd be a ruin. It's creepy as all hell. Kind of weird. Like, this is a really creepy island because I'll give you some of the history of Roosevelt. We're walking through South Point Park, by the way. This is a new park that's been recently developed as Cornell just recently opened a campus here. I'm going to talk about that. But Roosevelt Island, this is pretty cool. You got a bunch of cats and like geese and stuff over here just kind of hanging out. But this whole island has gone through so many different existences, like a lot of New York. That's something that I've talked about in other videos. But this island specifically. Now, the history of this island goes back all the way to the Native Americans. It was called Minnehannock initially, and it was actually used for hunting and all that stuff. But then the Dutch bought it in 1637. This Dutch governor named Van Twiller bought it. He bought it from the Indians, the Canarsie Indians, and it became Hogs Island. It was called Hogs Island then. So it went from Minnehannock to Hogs Island because there were tons of hogs here, and they used it to hunt, go figure. And we'll just cut through here. And it stayed Dutch until 1666. Now, the British took over New Amsterdam in 1664. There's a little kitty, the little cat, he's friendly. And they took it over in 1664, and then in 1666, this was taken by Captain John Manning, who was the sheriff of New York. He actually ended up getting arrested for treason and I think cowardice. You know, it's crazy you can get arrested for that. I would never be arrested for that, I'll tell you that much. I ain't no coward. But he was arrested, and he was basically sent here. He's like, all right, I'm just gonna retire to my island. Look at all those geese over there, that's pretty cool. These people doing their dancing. Hey, how are you? So he retires to his island, which is right here, and he basically lives out his days. He dies in 1686, right? He passes the island down to his daughter, who marries a man who's married to a man named Robert Blackwell. So in 1686, this becomes Blackwell's Island, and it stays Blackwell's Island for a little while, actually. So Blackwell stays here, and it stays named Blackwell's Island until a little later. It's changed from Blackwell's Island to Welfare Island. That's what it's actually named, Welfare Island, in 1921. And the reason they called it Welfare Island is because this island was always home to tons and tons of welfare institutions, right? This is like the first half of the 1800s. So Blackwell owns this island throughout the 1700s. It passes down to the families. We're actually going to see his house here in a little bit. You can see Queens over there in the distance. There's the Queensboro Bridge. Long Island City right over here. That's all Long Island City, very nice little neighborhood in Queens. Maybe I'll do a tour of that one day, you know. It's Long Island City and Queens over there. By the way, Queens is the second most populated borough of New York, behind only Brooklyn. Queens got like 2.3 million people. It's like around the size of the city of Houston, Texas. But it is the most diverse of all the boroughs. In fact, Queens is the most diverse county in the entire country. Saying a lot considering that this is a nation of immigrants. Don't you forget it, baby. Over here you can see Queensboro Bridge, AKA the 59th Street Bridge, immortalized in the Simon and Garfunkel song. The Queensboro Bridge, there it is, spanning the west channel of the East River into 59th Street. It's also called the Ed Koch Bridge. It was renamed the Ed Koch Bridge in 2011, I believe. Ed Koch was the mayor of New York from 1978 to 1989, I believe. Ed Koch was elected in 1977. In a pretty wild election. Here's a cool book recommendation. No big deal, I read. No big deal. I read books, but this is a good one. It's called The Bronx is Burning. The Bronx is Burning, really awesome book about the year 1977 in New York City. Really tumultuous year. It was the year of Son of Sam. It was the year of the Yankees World Series win. It was the year of the blackout. It was the year of the mayoral race. It was a totally nuts year. New York was kind of in the can. It was doing really poorly. Economically, a lot of stuff going on, but that was a really good book and document of that year that kind of describes New York in a nutshell. Anyways, you have over here to the right, you have Cornell Tech. We're gonna pass by that here in a second. Maybe we should walk over on the water, huh, Phil? How you doing, Phil? This is so rude, I haven't even asked you how you're doing.
I'm doing great.
Yeah? Thanks, man. Phil had never been to Roosevelt Island. Phil's from New Jersey, and he'd never been to Roosevelt Island, so this tour is just as good for him as it is for you. We'll walk here along the water. Now, by the way, keep in mind the East River, just like the Hudson River, isn't actually a river, isn't technically a river. This is very important to keep in mind. It's actually a tidal estuary. It rises and lowers with the tides. The Hudson River is the actual river, but it doesn't start where the Hudson River passes by Manhattan. It starts a little north of that. So here, to the right, you'll start seeing one of the campuses to Cornell Tech, which was just recently built a couple years ago. Cornell, by the way, is an Ivy League school. You know that? Did you know that, Phil?
Yeah.
Okay, nice work. Ivy League school, do you know what Ivy League school means?
It's like they have Ivy on there.
Phil, you're cursing again. It's very, very disheartening, very, very discouraging. Well, that was where it kind of originated. They referred to them from their ivy and things, but what it actually refers to is they're very fancy schools that date back very far, pretty much. There's 8 of them. Princeton, Yale, Dartmouth, Brown, Penn, Harvard, Cornell. No, Stanford is not. And I'm missing one. I already said Dartmouth. And one more. Borough Manhattan Community College. Columbia.
Columbia, there you go.
Columbia. Those are the 8. But Cornell is actually the newest. 1865 it was founded. That's pretty new. The rest of them date back to the colonial times. Isn't that cool? Yeah. Cornell was actually founded by Ezra Cornell, who actually was the founder of Western Union. Yeah, Western Union. The fastest way to send money. They're not a sponsor at all. I wish we had sponsors. Well, no, I don't. We're good. Just Patreon. Please sign up so I don't have to get sponsors ever. I don't want to ever have to do that. Check it out. This is cool. You can see the bridge here behind to the other side. You see this like walkway too of all the trees. Pretty sick. That's all Midtown, by the way. Midtown here to the south. You can see the UN, and then up to the north would be the Upper East Side. I'll do a video on the Upper East Side. Actually, it lost out to Roosevelt Island on the latest poll to make these videos. But yeah, you have Midtown East here. That's where I used to work, actually. I used to work in Midtown East back when I was in my legal days and hated every single day of my life. Nothing like being near suicidal every single day you wake up to go to work. But underneath here, you'll see too, maybe we'll catch it, is the tram. The Roosevelt Island Tramway. Super cool. The tramway I'll talk about right now on the tram. So the tramway was actually opened in 1976. It was supposed to be temporary until the subway was finished connecting Roosevelt Island to Manhattan, but it became such a staple that by 1989, when the subway was finished, people wanted to keep it. In fact, now it's become such a staple that in the movie Spider-Man, you remember the scene with the Green Goblin, where he comes up and Spider-Man, we're talking about the first one, by the way, with that dreamboat, Tobey Maguire, OMG. Anyways, this is before they made like Spider-Man 10 or whatever they're on now. I've said it before, but they've made too many superhero movies. Pretty cool view. In 2006, this thing got stuck for 7 hours. Isn't that crazy? Imagine if you were on your way to a date. You just show up after 7 hours and you're like, did you order yet? Sorry, I was stuck on the train for 7 hours. You know, you could pay like $80 at Disney World to do something that's a fake version of something like this. But you get to do it here for $2.75. New York's the best. So we're continuing to pass by Cornell here. Ivy League school, remember that. I know a thing or two about Ivies. I actually went to University of Florida. Yeah, they call it the Harvard of North Central Florida, so. Okay. We also passed by Strecker Laboratory, the former Strecker Laboratory, which was built in 1892 to be an actual pathological and bacteria research lab in 1892, believe it or not. And today it's used by the MTA to run a substation for its tunnel that goes underneath. There's the bridge, pretty cool view. Now, to keep in mind too, Roosevelt Island, because it's been, throughout the 1800s, it served so many purposes. I said it was a penitentiary, a massive penitentiary was built here in the 1830s. Now keep in mind too, in the 1820s, it was bought by the city to serve as this kind of welfare type island. Philip Hone was the man who kind of spearheaded this. He was a very influential figure in city politics in the first half of the 1800s. He was actually one of the men responsible for opening Washington Square Park. But he pushed the city to buy this in 1828, and then they immediately started using it for its growing population. And New York City was booming, remember this? This is when so in the 1820s, it had about 120,000 people living in New York City, making it the biggest city in the country. 120,000, that's it. That's all it took back then. So they needed a place to kind of serve the population that was getting sick, etc. There were still lots of outbreaks. So he bought this in 1820. They bought this in 1828, and they started opening up a penitentiary here, giant penitentiary. They opened up a lunatic asylum, which we'll see a little later. They opened up another hospital. They opened up an almshouse, a workhouse. This whole island was settled by either convicts or patients. Kind of crazy. And this is throughout the 1800s, pretty much. This little guy here is the trolley kiosk. The old trolley kiosk dates back to 1909. So now we're going to be walking on Main Street here. Today, this island is inhabited a lot by, I'm talking about it like it's, you know, the Amazon or something inhabited. That's ridiculous. The people who live here are people with money, pretty much. They've developed a lot of little luxury rentals and things like that. There is some affordable housing here too, but it's become kind of like a little suburb. It's so quiet here. It's actually almost creepy. I think it's haunted, pretty much. I mean, there's so much weird stuff that's gone on here. So this is Firefighters Field. Pretty cool place where you can, you know, play baseball, all kinds of stuff. And over there in the background, you have more of Queens. So Roosevelt Island has served all those purposes throughout its history, but it's had some famous guests. It's also had some famous people who are from here. In fact, some of the people who are from or lived here, Kofi Annan was the former Secretary General of the UN, as was U Thant, who we talked about earlier. But also Mike Epps, the comedian, and Buddy Hackett. You know who Buddy Hackett is, Phil? He's a comedian. You should know who he is. So is Mike Epps. Buddy Hackett was like a really like old school, like in the 60s. He was on Carson a lot, 70s. He had a pretty funny joke. You want me to tell it?
Sure.
The joke is, it's like his famous duck joke. He says there's this guy hunting. He's out in the field, he's hunting, and he shoots down this duck, and the duck comes falling down, and so he goes to retrieve the duck, but he has to hop a fence to go retrieve the duck. So he hops this fence, he finds the duck, but then all of a sudden this huge guy in overalls comes out. He's like, "Hey man, what are you doing? You're on my property. Get out of here." He's like, "Well, I just shot this duck. It's my duck, I guess, so I'm just gonna take it and leave." And the guy says, "No, you're not. This is my property. That's my duck." He's like, "Please, sir, I'm sorry. I'm just a city guy. I just went hunting. I don't know what to do." He's like, "Well, you got to take your city guy and get out of here. This is my duck." He says, "Please, I don't go hunting very often." So the guy in overalls is a farmer. He says, "Well, we'll settle this the way we do in the country, okay? And you can keep your duck." He's like, we're gonna take turns kicking each other in the groin, and the last one standing keeps the duck.
Yeah.
And the guy's like, "Well, okay." So the farmer says, "I go first." So the farmer stops, he runs up, and he just kicks the guy in the nuts. And the guy falls on the ground. He's like, "Oh my God." Oh. He rides around for like 30 minutes, and he finally gets up. And he's like, "Oh, okay, fine. I guess it's my turn now." And the farmer says, "You can just keep the duck." That's a good joke, man. All right, I just spent like the last 5 minutes telling that joke. People who are like watching my channel are like, "What? This isn't what we signed up for." Okay, so we're walking down Main Street here in Roosevelt Island. I was telling you some of the famous alumni, but when it was an almshouse, when it was a penitentiary and all these different things, it saw a lot of famous people as well. One of the famous people was Mae West. Mae West, she was like a very scandalous performer and artist in the 1920s. She produced a play called Sex, and she was actually sentenced for that. She served 10 days, well, she was supposed to serve 10 days on Roosevelt Island. She only served a few, but she actually wrote an article about her time here when she left, and with that money, she actually funded a library for the penitentiary here. That's pretty cool. Mae West, for all you young kids, she was like a celebrity, a very scandalous celebrity. She was like, I guess, if like Kim Kardashian, but with talent, I guess, too. So we're continuing down Main Street. This is the main drag of Roosevelt Island. And off here to the right, you're going to see the Blackwell House. Ooh. $1,000 says this place is haunted. This house dates back to 1796. It was built by Jacob Blackwell, who was the great-grandson of Robert Blackwell. Remember, this whole island belonged to the family until the early 1800s, which is crazy. They had their own island in New York City. So this is the entrance here to the Blackwell House. It's now like a little community center, pretty cool. There's like no one here. Yeah, it's nuts. Pretty cool little house though. Pretty cool to have your own island in New York. All these houses, it's crazy. They look so old. We were talking about the Smallpox Hospital earlier. That Smallpox Hospital looks crazy. That's it's the only protected landmark ruin in New York City. It looks like something that Scooby-Doo would be running around, you know? There's a New York Public Library, Roosevelt Island branch, the New York Public Library, which I've talked about in other books. I talked about in my Midtown video. Did I say books? I talked about in my Midtown video. Sick plug, baby. Oh. These people are watching me walk around. They're like, what is this person doing in our neighborhood? So you can see all these tall buildings now are pretty much residential. A lot of them were built recently. They're built for people who want to get out of the city, get a deal on their living situations. Also too, Roosevelt Island had some other famous visitors. William Boss Tweed actually was held here briefly for about a year, I believe. William Boss Tweed, one of the most corrupt men in the history of New York City. What he did basically was he became the head of Tammany Hall. Tammany Hall was this organization that was meant to help the Irish who were coming to New York in the mid-1800s, help them find jobs, places to live, and using that power, he basically became a very corrupt politician. He was able to guarantee politicians thousands and thousands of votes because that's all he required of these Irish. He's like, just vote the way I want and it's good. And so he would go to a politician and say, hey, if I give you 200,000 votes, will you do this, this, and this? And they said, yes, please. So he became very, very corrupt, ended up dying in prison. But he did escape, which is kind of crazy. This is a crazy story. He escaped prison and he fled to Europe. But using the pictures from the cartoons that Thomas Nast would draw, people recognized him and extradited him to the United States. This is a really cool building right here. This here is the Church of the Good Shepherd, Chapel of the Good Shepherd, sorry. You'll have lots of little churches here in Roosevelt Island because they catered to the people who were at the different institutions. And this is one of them. It was built in 1889. It was actually designed by Frederick Clark Withers, which is pretty cool. Frederick Clark Withers, by the way, he designed Jefferson Market Courthouse, which tried Mae West. What a small world, huh? Small world alert. All you people who are watching from, let's say, Europe, you're probably thinking, oh, great, another church. 1889, that's really old. You're like, my shoes are older than that. Well, that's old for New York, so chill out. A couple other famous stories of Roosevelt Island. One is Emma Goldman was actually kept here. Emma Goldman, one of the pioneers of the anarchist way of thinking and anarchism theory. She was Russian. She was actually deported eventually. She caused quite a stir here. Also, another famous person here who came through was Charles Dickens. He wasn't arrested, but he came and visited here when he toured the United States. People forget he wrote his American Notes in 1842 about his visit. He actually talked about this place, Blackwell's Island back then. Another famous person too is Nelly Bly. Nelly Bly is a pretty cool story. She came here. Oh, you gonna fix the lighting there, Phil? All right, do it. Phil's in his magic fingers. Phil wasn't able to come with me to Puerto Rico. You guys want to see the Puerto Rico video? Sick plug. You can. That was a cool one. Trying to take this worldwide. Maybe one day we make enough off Patreon, me and Phil can travel the world. But here you have Tony Copabianco Field. It's kind of cool. It was actually named after this guy who was just a Little League coach here. Pretty cool. It's a pretty low bar for for naming your parks, but hey, I don't know. I guess I could think of some cool, maybe they'll make a memorial fountain to my Little League coach in New York. Here too is also the bridge. This is a Roosevelt Island Bridge. So this bridge was finished in 1955. That's pretty recent. And before it, there was no way for cars to get into Roosevelt Island directly. They had to take the Queensboro Bridge and take an elevator down, which sounds like it's a big pain in the butt. So I was talking about Nelly Bly before I rudely got cut off by Tony Copabianco Field. Nelly Bly was this reporter. She worked for Joseph Pulitzer's New York World, and she was actually assigned to cover Blackwell's Island. It was called Welfare Island by then. By the way, it was called Welfare Island in 1921. It was Blackwell's Island all the way until 1921. So all the way through the 1800s, it was known as Blackwell's Island when all the stuff was here. But then in 1921, they're like, screw it, let's just name it Welfare Island because that's what it is. It's for the welfare of the people. Anywho, she's assigned to work here as undercover. She pretends to be crazy for 10 days. Isn't that nuts? That's crazy. But she's assigned to work. She's assigned to work this beach. She pretends to be crazy, comes here, and then reports on the conditions. And they kind of get people riled up to make some reform. Sometimes you got to stir the pot, baby. She was actually famous for being the first female to cover a war on the front lines when she was sent to World War II. She was sent to World War II to cover that. By the way, Joseph Pulitzer was the head of the New York World. You guys may recognize his name. He was a newspaperman. He came over here from Hungary. He was a Hungarian immigrant. Started the New York World newspaper. Well, he bought it and then made it nice. And then he became famous. He was actually one of William Randolph Hearst's big competitors. But with his fortune, he actually funded tons and tons of projects around New York, including the Pulitzer Fountain in front of the Plaza Hotel, which I also covered on my Fifth Avenue tour. Sick plug, baby. Click those things, watch them, come on. Some good stuff in these things. Go figure, someone's trying to make you some videos that actually teach you something. I guess you can go back to watching videos where, you know, teenagers are pulling people's pants down or something. I guess that sounds pretty entertaining. I don't know what to tell you. That was Joseph Pulitzer. He also funded the Pulitzer Prize, which is given out every year at Columbia University, an Ivy League school. Look at that, we're tying everything back. It's given out for excellence in journalism and literature every year. And he also funded the pedestal of the Statue of Liberty. Pretty cool. No dogs allowed, Phil. Phil's a dog, ladies. No, he's not. He's a good guy. So this is a pretty cool thing. We're gonna walk by here very soon. This is the AVAC Center facility here in Roosevelt Island. So the AVAC facility is actually a vacuum that actually sucks all of the trash from all of the residential buildings through this underground tube. So there's no garbage pickup here. People throw their trash into these things at their residential building, and it goes into this giant container from which all the trash is just sucked by this ridiculously, incredibly powerful vacuum. And it's taken to this place, compressed, and then it's taken off the island. That's pretty cool. This is one of only 2 places in the country that do this. Here and Disney World. Pretty cool technology they got here. How much would it suck to work there? That's pretty good, right, Phil? Thanks. Now, Roosevelt Island is one of the many islands that are around New York City. I told you already about Utant Island, North Brother Island, Randall's Island, Governor's Island, Liberty Island, Ellis Island. I mean, Manhattan itself, for all you people who don't know, very elementary stuff I'm giving you here, is an island. Oh, but few people realize that the Bronx is the only borough of New York that is on mainland United States. Everything else is on island. Manhattan, Queens, and Brooklyn are on Long Island. And then you have Staten Island. Also, too, keep in mind how small Manhattan really is. Manhattan's only about 22 square miles. It's the smallest of all the boroughs by land. Pretty crazy. There's a cool little park here. You can see all the little garden here. They have a lot of these public gardens that are taken care of by the people who live here. They have a lot of these in the East Village, actually, as well. Hey. So we're walking a little more north. We're almost at the end. Don't worry. I know this is a little bit of a longer one, but this is Roosevelt Island. You're going to cover the entire island in one walk. Here to the left, you have Pony Field. Another one of the parks here. There's actually a park here named after Al Lewis, who was a famous resident here. Actually died here. Al Lewis, better known as the Grandpa from the Munsters. They named a park here after the Grandpa from the Munsters. That's pretty cool, right? Once again, an interesting choice of a namesake. You're just waiting for them to open a park in New York called, you know, Guy from Swamp Thing Botanical Gardens or something. Here are the tennis courts. This is a little secret too, by the way. When it's not pandemic, this is an easy place to get tennis courts in New York. It's very hard to play tennis in New York because there's not that many courts and everyone wants to play tennis. Pretty fun sport. But this is a little secret. You can actually reserve these courts. You go online and reserve courts like you do all these courts in New York City. It's just a little easier to get these because they're more out of the way. Little tip for all you tennis players, for all you Jennifer Capriati's and Monica Selis's out there. Those are some real 90s references, by the way. Maybe I should say Roger Federer's. Here to the left is a really cool building, a very important landmark here. It's called the Octagon. Pretty intimidating name. Has nothing to do with MMA, all you meatheads out there. The Octagon is this entrance thing that was the entrance to the lunatic asylum. The lunatic asylum, which was opened in 1839. That's the Octagon there, pretty cool. It's now the entranceway to luxury apartments. Everything in New York is condos, man. Holy Lord. This bush right here, Phil, is condos. You can burrow yourself in there. It only costs $4,000 a month. Yep. But that Octagon, the whole building, that was the actual lunatic asylum. Pretty cool. That's what they called it, the lunatic asylum. Pretty on the nose, right? I guess that was their only option after the name, the New York Nut House, Nutty Idiot Shack was taken. Over here too, you have the Kohler Hospital, which was built in the 1950s. There was the Kohler and the Goldwater, which was built in the 1930s. The Goldwater was actually demolished to create the campus for Cornell, which we saw earlier. But this one's still here, and they still have patients, still pretty big. We're walking to the north. But the Octagon too, that whole lunatic asylum, eventually changed. It became a hospital. That place has got to be haunted. You should see this Octagon, old pictures of the Octagon. It was deserted for a long time. This place is very creepy at times at night because it's so quiet. It's quiet right now, if you can't tell. But the Octagon and that lunatic asylum was actually designed by a man named Alexander Jackson Davis. And he was the man who designed the Customs House in New York City. He designed the Customs House on Wall Street, the one that replaced Federal Hall, the Federal Hall National Monument. So we're walking to the north here, see more geese here. These things are mean, by the way, don't mess around with them. I know I often advocate feeding the squirrels and stuff. These ain't no squirrels, I'll tell you that much. Hopefully I don't get these things charging me on camera. Pretty cool though. There's a lot of them. They definitely messed me up. Another famous person, by the way, who did a stay on Roosevelt Island was Billie Holiday. Billie Holiday. Ooh. Who, by the way, got her start here in New York. She was a jazz singer. She got her start at the Cafe Society in Greenwich Village. Billie Holiday, who I covered in my Greenwich Village video. Sick plug. We're getting to the end of all this here. We're getting to Lighthouse Park. This is a really cool little park here at the end of the island called Lighthouse Park. Why do you think it's called Lighthouse Park, Phil? You are the smartest man alive, Phil. So I pay you the big bucks. So this is Lighthouse Park because there's a lighthouse. Check it out. In the distance, you can see a little lighthouse. That lighthouse was built in 1872. Guess who built it? James Renwick Jr. The same guy who designed the Smallpox Hospital. James Renwick Jr. designed it. Neo-Gothic, just like the Smallpox Hospital. Remember, Neo-Gothic was there was a huge boom of Neo-Gothic architecture in the mid-1800s. Let's see, what was built back then? Trinity Church. The Brooklyn Bridge was started. Grace Church. You know, lots of Neo-Gothic going up. Pretty cool. But there's a Neo-Gothic, as was the Smallpox Hospital. It was actually a guy who was a patient at the lunatic asylum who they said built a fort to protect the island from the British. He was kind of nuts. He built a clay fort and they had to demolish it to build this lighthouse. His name was John McCarthy. Isn't that crazy? He was actually there was actually a plaque there memorializing him for a very long time. And here, right to the left, this whole area where you see the channel was what they used to call Hell Gate, a really, really treacherous area of the East River where they say over 100 ships have sunk there. And it wasn't until like the 1870s that they started to do something about it. And they sunk caissons, which are these huge airtight boxes, and people went down there and they dug, excavated, used dynamite and explosives to loosen a lot of the rocks out of the ground that created such a bad current right over here. And, kind of saved the day. And to the north you have Randall's Island, which is another island which I'll talk about in a different video. Okay, so take it easy. This is one of the reasons they built this lighthouse, because it was so treacherous in this area. And there you got the north. Look at that, pretty sick. Pretty amazing views. That's one of the reasons why so many people move to Roosevelt Island. Well, we're here at the end of the island. This is the north end. We've made it through the entire Roosevelt Island, guys. It's a pretty amazing view. You can see here, there's Manhattan, and over here is Queens, 2 of the 5 boroughs of New York, which weren't created until the year 1898 when New York City consolidated as the 5 boroughs I've talked about, and then a million different videos. Go watch some of them. I don't know what to tell you guys. We made it to the end. Roosevelt Island, really cool little place that, believe it or not, a lot of New Yorkers haven't really even been to. It's not very common to make the trek here. The tram ride itself, I think, makes it worth it. Really cool little view. You can hang out, you know, take some cool video. But yeah, we made it to the end. I don't know what to tell you guys other than please subscribe. That's the least you can do. I'm giving you guys all a ton of good information. You can follow on Instagram and all that stuff. But also, more importantly, please, 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 subscribe to the Patreon. I beg you. It really helps. I'm really trying to expand this stuff. I've looked, believe me, there's not a whole lot of people on YouTube doing what I'm doing. So I really want to grow this, show you guys more stuff, tell you guys some more cool history. Really helps us out. But yeah, man, I don't know what to tell you. Roosevelt Island, cool story. Cool story, bro, as the kids say. Did I miss anything, Phil?
I don't think so.
I don't think so, right? Yeah, I don't know what to tell you other than thanks for watching, and see you later. Sick.